Indeed.
Okay, well, yeah, so this is the cafe, and I've got a Dean and DeLuca cup, so I'm feeling very metro today.
All right.
Oh
I'm
my
just
gosh,
in my office.
your office is wild.
Yes, a
I
lot
love
of
it. I
pictures
love
of the dogs and other things of over time, and
I
a lot
love
of
it.
tchotchkes, raised stuff up there. A lot of, let's see here.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot
Yeah,
of raised
man. It looks like
giveaways, bobbleheads, and stuff like that
at
over the
first at
years.
first I thought it was a garage.
Okay, all right. Well,
Okay, dear, let's get started. Oh my gosh, such a pleasure meeting you last week at the neighborhood HOA. I was so impressed by your chutzpah, quite frankly. I mean, to put it in a nutshell. And I'm always really curious about why anybody wants to run for office this time in this culture that we live in 2024. Seems like it's a more trouble than it's worth, but I want to get your take on it. But thank you for joining us. I think we're calling this the You Have Arrived podcast. I don't know what we're calling it. It's some type of a video vlog, but it's definitely gonna You Have Arrived is a great brand, so I'm gonna latch onto that and continue to squeeze as much juice out of that as I can.
you are.
So Jared Leone is joining us from his really cool office in Clearwater, Florida. He's running for city council, and he is a former journalist. He's a current journalist. He's had an amazing career in national news, freelance, done a lot of really neat things with his career, and we're going to talk about some of those. And yeah, we're just going to get started. And since you're the guest, I wondered if, and you're the journalist. I just pretend to be a journalist. You're the master of the trade. I just pretend. Right. But I'd love a chance to let you go first if you're willing to do that. Now that we're finally on this silly Google
we made it.
It was a lot. It took us like 25 minutes to get our stuff straight this morning. So thank you for your patience.
Gotta love technology. Thank you.
You're welcome. Do you have your coffee?
Yeah, a little bit here.
Good.
Dog looks like one of my dogs. So.
Oh my gosh. So just to get to know you a little bit, who do you come home to at night?
My 4 dogs. Yeah, Mia, Brinkley, Argos, and Nemo.
Oh my gosh.
Mia's 10. I think Brinkley, he came in now. I think he's
so sweet. 4 is a lot, Jared. How did you get up with 4 dogs?
A lot of walking, a lot of dog food.
Yeah. That's great.
But they were all Southeastern guide dogs. They were all Southeastern guide dog puppies in training I raised. So they're all very familiar with the same obedience and the same kind of, work with me. So one dog turned into 2 dogs, and it was still like, it's only like 1 dog, and then 2 dogs turns into 3 dogs, and
they start replicating. You're so cute.
Hopefully they won't be too challenging while we try to accomplish this.
No, it'll be fine. My dog's here too, so she'll start snoring soon, and we'll have to kick her. Not really. Kick Stella. She's amazing. Yeah. I have a little bulldog. I don't know if you've seen her on my social. She's kind of internet famous, but she's the light of our lives. She's the glue. So it's wonderful. So yeah, if you want to ask the questions that you've sent over, I think all of them are interesting. Yeah. If you want to go first, and then I'll jump into what I want to find out about you, and we'll have about a 40 minute
it was great. Yeah, great. Thank you, Shannon. Yeah, it was great to meet you the other night at the Del Oro Groves neighborhood meeting, and you too, you're a spark. So I was very curious about, we'll start here. What brought you to Clearwater? All the things you've done, you're here now.
Well, my husband got a position at Power Design, which is a major electrical contractor. They have licenses in 32 states, and they're a major employer in St. Petersburg. And because my husband has always been very ambitious, that's something I really find very attractive about him. I said, let's try it. And so we had moved about 10 years prior from Panama City to Gainesville, and we had totally disrupted my kids' lives at that point. Pulled them out of school, a really, really great school, pulled them out of their friend circle. And, and that's kind of like what you do in the military. And I was like, okay, we're going to do this because, if you don't have love in your life, then what do you really have? So I had met someone I loved. He happened to live in Gainesville. I lived in Panama City. was living the single mom life there for a couple years. And then I decided, we decided that in 2020, in the height of the pandemic, we would continue with trying to relocate. We had to take our house off the market for about 4 months as everyone just sat still, and we did lockdown. We had an office about this. Well, you can't tell how big my office is. We had a back Florida room that was screened in, and we had our desks butted right next to each other, and we had 4 monitors on either side, and we worked, and it was so funny because both of us would be on meetings and one of us would have to go outside, and we loved that house and we loved Gainesville, but he had lived there for 25 years at that point. I had lived there for about 7, and I loved Gainesville. I didn't love my job, but I thought I'll find a different job eventually. But I was like, what? Well, let's go ahead and do this. This is a great opportunity for his career. So we moved, and I thought for sure I'd find a job right away, here in the Tampa area. But I didn't. So I continued to work through the pandemic for about another 2.5 years from home. My employer did not like the fact that I was working remotely. I was doing a very good job, but they just really liked having somebody in the office. Just their preference. They have more traditional roles. So they kind of treated me like crap. I felt like toward the last couple months, I had a young lady that was working for me that I had trained. She was really efficient. Her name was Elizabeth, and she was living in Gainesville, and then she and her boyfriend broke up, and she decided to relocate to North Carolina, and she thought she could keep her job because she did most of it remotely anyway. That's something that the pandemic taught us. We can work from home and we can still do a good job. So Elizabeth moved to North Carolina, and they terminated her employment, which means I had no one. And that job, I was a marketing director for a property management group. So my assistant, my marketing manager, it took about a year to get someone up to speed, and she was the 3rd or 4th person that I had trained. And over the course of a 6-year career with them. And when she left, I said, are we going to hire someone else? And they said, I just don't think we can afford it. So I think that decision by them was kind of my call to exit. So I resigned in May, and my book's all about that. But I love Clearwater. I've lived in 3 cities in the state of Florida. I lived in Panama City for about 12 years, Gainesville for about 6. Actually, Panama City, I take that back, was about 9. I love Panama City. I love the Panhandle. I had a really successful, magazine. I had 7 magazines up and down the Panhandle. I was part of the Haibu project. But I love Clearwater. I love Safety Harbor. I love this area. I think Tampa's beautiful. I think there's lots of opportunity. People are friendly. I love this area, and I don't ever want to move. So hopefully I'll be able to stay in Delaware Groves a long time.
That's a great segue to the next question, which is what are some of your favorite things about the Clearwater and Tampa Bay area? And it sounds like you have quite a bit of background to kind of balance and measure what those things are in relation to where other places are you've lived.
Yeah, and I think that's a fantastic question. Thank you for asking it. So I've lived in 10 cities in my life. And I think that a lot of that is, trying to find a better job. Most of the time, that's why you move. But also, when you look at a potential job in a potential area, much like when we lived in Spokane, Washington, we had 3 little boys. They were 2, 5, and 8. And when they're little like that, they have friendships, but they can be recreated. And I was like, this is a great time to move. My husband at the time, my kids' dad, he had a position out of a really good position that he got offered out of Tyndall, and as a contractor. And so we took that position. He took that position. I say we because I micromanaged him. He was like having another child. He was a perpetual lying alcoholic, and I write about all that in my book. But I was just like having another child, right? So I said, we are working different shifts, and our daycare is more than my wage unless we never see each other. I said, this is not a quality of life situation. We love Spokane, Washington. And it broke my heart to leave. We had a lake place and everything. But when we moved, we moved sight unseen to Panama City, Florida. And I thought, well, how could that be bad? And it was great. We love living there. And thankfully, that for the time frame that we lived there, about 10 years, there was no hurricanes. We did have a serious flood that took out a lot of our stuff after our divorce. And that story's in the book too. Thankfully, I had met Tony at that point, and he kind of rescued us, which was like locked and loaded. This guy is mine, My kids are like, this man is amazing. He just really showed up for us, and he continues to do that. So, I love Clearwater. I love Safety Harbor. We're out there a lot. We try to get over there a few times a week. I try to go every day if I could, but I get busy. I get kind of I can walk there a mile from Safety Harbor. We live on Bayshore Boulevard. And so, but yeah, we go into St. Pete. My favorite part of St. Pete is the Museum of Fine Art. I think I mentioned that to you the other night. We became members there, and we just, it's a very affordable way to go out. And when you're restarting your career over, like I resigned from corporate America, and I'm still struggling. It's been almost a year now, and I'm trying to find my new career and my new path. And God told me that the book was going to come out, and then there'd be opportunity. And I didn't know what that looked like, but I'm trying to honor my promise that I made when I got my tattoo. So, but I love Clearwater. The downtown's kind of strange to me. I haven't explored much. I haven't been to the Sound yet for anything. I love Ruth Eckerd Hall. I love to go to events there. We're just walking distance from there, so that's cool. The people are great. And I talk to, so many snowbirds, especially now when I'm out on the trail, and they tell me where they're from, and we have a nice conversation, and they're always so happy to be here. And I've always loved that about Florida, because in the wintertime, it's vibrant. It's like our season, right? Everybody's here. And I love it in the summer too. It gives you an excuse to have to go to the beach because it's so hot.
Well, so you mentioned, that's and I guess I can talk more about that later, but that was one of the things that I've loved about living here for a long time, is meeting the people who come here to vacation and then end up moving here to live, and realizing that where we live is one of those beautiful places in the world.
Sure.
I'm curious, because you mentioned previous work in journalism, if you have any memorable stories from that career path you had.
Wow. I mean, that's hard.
Yeah. I
That's
thought
hard.
when I was putting that question together, I thought about how I would answer that and
Yeah.
how difficult that question
Oh,
would be
man.
for me to answer. So
I think it's probably good to get a little background about what I wanted out of my career. So when I was a sophomore in high school, I was raised in a small Colorado town called Craig, Colorado. And it's not far from Steamboat Springs. Most people realize that. It's in northwestern Colorado, so it's closer to Wyoming. It's I guess that would be west. I'm sorry. It's west of Steamboat Springs. So I didn't have a lot of opportunity. I had a great family. My parents were divorced, but we had, pretty decent relationships with most of the family on either side throughout my upbringing. I had a really beautiful childhood in a really safe little town. And then, high school hit, and I started watching sitcoms and movies of, people living in the city and metropolitan and urban life and suburbs. And I didn't feel like Craig had any of that. Craig had houses with really close-minded people that lived in them. We didn't really have much of a community, if that makes sense. There was a community there. I just didn't feel like I was plugged in for some reason. I don't know, maybe it's because I was a child of divorce. But when I was 15, I was a sophomore in high school, and I decided to take a elective, and it was journalism. And from the very first day of class, I loved it. From about the first week on, Miss Katie Gray was my teacher. I don't know where she's at or what she's doing, but that woman changed my life. And she said, "You're really good at this." And I said, "I love this." And I said, "I'm going to do this for the rest of my life." And she made me the head editor my sophomore year, which was unheard of. So I was jonesing. I loved it. And I got an internship. I think I told you this. My first job was an internship at the Daily Press. That newspaper has since almost disbanded. They don't have any reporters there locally anymore. They have one person that sits in the office, but they sold the building, they sold the press, they do all the printing at the Steamboat Pilot. It's really sad what community news, what the lack of that has. It just gives no accountability to city government. And that's the number one thing that we really need to focus on, because who else is going to be at those meetings every week, keeping those guys accountable and ladies accountable? Yep. So that's the main problem that I see with the loss of local news. There's lots of issues, but that's the number one problem. So yeah, I continued having fun in high school and, being a rowdy teenager like everybody does. And I continued to intern, and I had a job at the deli and worked 2 jobs, partied all night, got straight A's. I was like, I love this. I'm learning, I'm vibing, I'm getting to know people. The great thing about being a journalist is that you have license to ask anyone anything at any time, especially a freelancer. And that's kind of what I was, when I was younger. I was like, I want to do a story on this. So the first story I did, I'm going to tell you about that. And then, of course, I got my marketing degree because I went into the military first, and then I got out of the service. I was living in Washington, and all of my friends had marketing degrees. And they're like, well, if you get this marketing degree, you can do anything with it. You might get into journalism, you might get into insurance, you might get into something else. So I got my marketing degree, and the first job I got was as a journalist. It was as an editorial assistant at the Panama City News Herald. So I was like, are you kidding me? So I don't know. I love my marketing career. I've really gone back and forth, which has been a beautiful thing. And I've really enjoyed learning the science of marketing. And that's an aspect of the book that, I think if I hadn't been entrenched in the marketing discipline for the last 10 years, that I probably wouldn't have had the ability to write the book the way I wrote it, because I know what people want. I always think about the target market, and I know how to deliver on what they want. So my first chapter is a homage to Curious George, because that very much relates to what the Rays did when they brought Curious George to life. So I don't know if you know that story, but you will once you read the book. But yeah, my first story that was really interesting, and I'm not sure if I wrote about it in this book. It might be in the next book, but I wrote my first story that I was really curious about was when I was in, I don't know, sophomore year, probably. I had a lot of friends who were getting pregnant, and I thought, wow, this is really a problem. Like, these girls are not prepared to be moms at all. And so I did a story on that, and I felt like it probably touched people. It was interesting to ask the questions of my peers that were now new moms or pregnant. And I felt like that was a really interesting story for it to be like my first expose. And I dug deep, and I think that's our job as journalists. You want to ask the questions that, if the reader was in the same room, what would the reader ask? That's always what you think of. That's how you frame things. So there's been amazing stories. There's been so many. And when I was working at the News Herald, I said, I don't want to do crime. I don't want to do city government. I want the feel-good stories. I'm sorry, I'm a mom. So I've always gravitated toward edification over politicization. So that's not right. It's early. Yeah. I've had a fun career. I bounced around a lot, but it is what it is.
Well, I'm curious then, what was the spark that led you to end up writing your book?
Prostate cancer.
Yeah.
My husband was diagnosed in December of 2022, and I didn't really have a network here. I had a couple ladies in the Bunko League that I knew, but I didn't have my good girlfriend group. When he got this diagnosis and he started this treatment, which is called androgen deprivation therapy, takes your testosterone down to 0. And you don't think about what that does to a man, but it was horrible. And I summarize it this way when I tell people that my strong, confident, articulate, brilliant, confident, fun, loving man was reduced to a 13-year-old, little girl. She was about to get her period. He was defensive. He was jealous. He had no self-esteem. He was exhausted. He was not able to speak a lot of times because he just didn't have the words, and he was so stressed out. So we've found a lot of ways through this writing. So I started writing, I started journaling to him, sharing him Google Docs, and trying to get into his head. Because if I just said, you are acting not like yourself, he would get defensive. So if I could send him a Google Doc and tell him, remember when 5 years ago, Wyatt had his heart surgery, and you were the first person to wake up with him and it's Shan's, and you were feeding him applesauce, and that feeling I felt of you, and that feeling, because you let me sleep for a few hours and you got up with him and you were such a good dad to him. And do you remember how that bonded us as a couple and as a family, that experience? Well, because of that, because of the richness and the goodness of our relationship, I want you to know that the way you're acting and the way you're talking is hurting me. Like, I would have to preface it, and they would have to be these long Google Docs. So that's where it started. But I just really needed to get away from him because we were just, and I was like, I don't know who you are. I've got to go figure this out somewhere else. So I drove up to Panama City, saw my girlfriends, stayed a week. Wasn't sure if I was going to come back. I was like, I don't know what this is, but I don't like it. It doesn't feel right to me in a lot of different ways. So I needed to kind of get some advice, and nobody knows what to tell you. No one person, unless they've gone through this exact thing. Well, no one girlfriend could have told me. So I've used about resources from about 10 different people, most of them friends, a couple family members, but most of them girlfriends and guy friends, my mermaids and my merman. And I had to ask them different segments. I'm like, okay, if you were a guy, how would this make you feel? If you were in this situation, how would this make you feel? So I found that the 30-day journey that my book was, it's a journaling journey. I was trying to find ways to help me cope, and I did. And really what I found out at the end of the day was everyone I met had their own bullshit that they were dealing with. Everyone I met was going through something. And it made me feel like, wow. Like if I'm complaining about this, and I have a friend who's got a husband that had a stroke when she was pregnant 4 years ago, and he's just going to sit on the couch, and he's going to have a stuttering problem for the rest of his life, and he's never going to be able to make love to her again. Like if that's, and they're married and they're doing fine. And if I can't deal with prostate cancer, then what does that mean about me? So it was a real beautiful thing. It was a real beautiful thing. And God just put these people in my life to teach me lessons. And I wrote about it for 30 days. And then of course I chunked in a bunch of other goodness and fun and memories and substantiated everything. But it's been a heck of a year, man.
I bet. What was something you learned then through that process? Whether it was through writing it or something you learned about yourself or the family.
Yeah. Well, it's empathy,
Yeah.
Empathy is what's missing in our homes. Empathy is what is missing in our friendships, especially since COVID. Everybody's about closed off, not talking, not breathing, just trying to be alone because it's safe, but it's not good. So we have to be empathetic, and we have to try and bring people out of their shells at work and at home. And so I believe, the tagline of my book is a roadmap to empathy where stories light the way. And I feel like You Have Arrived is a very typical example of someone dealing with life. And if a CEO were to read that book, they might just get a little empathy, and they might just be open to calling a consultant, because that's the only way you're going to change your culture. That's the only way you're going to stop people from leaving your organization in droves. That's the only way you're going to actually make money. That's the only way your company is going to grow. And it starts with a consultant. So that's what my new career is. I'm a organizational leadership consultant. And so I'm promoting my book really heavily in the next months. I'm promoting myself as a consultant, but I think that my book would be also a really good tool for other consultants, because they could say, okay, I want, the C-level executive staff to read this book. What kind of impact would this book have? Start there. It's a soft, fun, easy read. So yeah, I've got a mission, and it's to spread empathy.
Mm-hmm. I know that's an extremely important trait. Like you said, whether it's in workplace culture or with your friends, or just I think anyone who finds success, it's because they have empathy. So.
Yeah. And I think vulnerability is a superpower. So you want to get vulnerable? Are you done with your 5?
Sure.
Okay, cool. Oh, that was fun. Thank you for asking the right questions. That was really fun. Okay,
great.
So I'm going to do my best to put on my journalism hat. I've had my marketing hat on for a couple weeks. Okay, so when I first met you last week, we were at this meeting, you were having a conversation with someone else, and I heard you say that, and it was just a magic moment for me. But I heard you say that you couldn't write local news because you were running for office.
Mm-hmm.
And I was reminded of all of those times during 2020 and 2021 where someone very often said that's fake news to discredit the free press. And it infuriated me. And I stood up for the free press on my social media. And I said, as a journalist, that is not what we do. As a journalist, if you are you don't make millions as a journalist.
Mm-mm.
You do something that's valuable for humanity. as a journalist. So to have someone just come along for his own benefit and say fake news to discredit the free press, it was maddening to me. So I would like for you, here's the question: describe the ethics of journalism and how it relates to the claims some politicians use to discredit the free press as claiming stories are fake news. So to you, what does being an ethical journalist mean?
Oh, thanks, Shannon. Yeah, I thought about this question because for me, I feel like participating in journalism and working in the field for 20 years, you kind of forget about those ethics that you um, take to heart when you first start. And so over time, it just becomes part of how you go about your business, and you don't really think about how those pieces are kind of substantiated. And for me, and I think for the thousands of other journalists out there, the Society of Professional Journalists Code of Ethics is the guiding force, and the pillars that they put forth are what you want to achieve in all facets when you're working on a story or multimedia, however you may be producing information for an audience. And those are to seek truth and report it, to be to minimize harm, to act independently, to be accountable and transparent. And I think those things are some of the same guiding principles that I'm bringing forth running for city council. Is as a career in journalism, I've been proud of having an unbiased and fact-based approach to reporting. And as a volunteer, serving in the city's environmental advisory board and working as a volunteer as the president of my neighborhood association, always try to put forth that same fact-based, research-minded approach that sometimes what we want to do might not make sense to do. Well, that's what we are trying to find out. We're not trying to just say, look, we're trying to do this because we want to do it. We want to do something and find out, well, is it achievable? And how has it been done in other places? And can we do it better? Or, you know, but just to try to railroad an idea, that's not the approach that I would have. And that's not the approach I've had as a journalist. And I think that's extremely important. So.
I love that. I love that. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that question.
Yeah, yeah, and I think as another aspect to it,
Yeah.
sadly for decades now we've had this erosion of principles in journalism, and some of it is because of the fairness doctrine that for whatever reason in the late 80s was abandoned by the FCC. So you had this change in having to by law allow independent voices and not just being so one-sided one way or the other. And I think that really led to this evolution of where we are now culturally.
Well, yeah, let's
That
unpack that a little
ecosystem.
bit because people, like, especially my kids, I have 26, 22-year-old and 19. They don't trust any news source because they know that it can be manipulated, and a lot of those a lot of the one-sided media are monetizing their content. And I have, they're at the point now where they just get their news from Instagram. They get their news from independent journalists that are on the ground that can show them what's happening. And I think there's some value to that. But can you speak to that a little bit about the new trends in news and how that's, how that's
Yeah, I can a
happening?
little bit. So some of that is you get what you pay for, and I've seen how more and more, like you said, a younger demographic tries to fill this information void with influencers. And I think when you do that, you have to also keep in mind, again, who's paying these influencers and what is the
Yeah.
information. um you know
Mm.
Seek truth and report it, right? And if your mom tells you something, you still got to check what she had to say, right? Like, and I think that there's opinions come cheap, facts cost money. And so sometimes that's the problem, and the challenge. And then again, like I said, like determining how independent these whether it's regardless of if it's just one person reporting out there or if it's other people. Hold on one second.
Okay.
One of the dogs is crying.
Okay.
Okay, sorry about that.
No problem.
Um, it takes me off track when I hear the dog crying in the background. Um, so yeah, I think that still legacy media is suffering because of that inability to connect with a younger demographic. I'm not going to say that's anything new, though. When I went into journalism 20 years ago, that was a problem. That was a
Yeah.
challenge. 10 years ago, that was still a problem and a challenge. Newspapers tried to react by getting into different social media platforms and then still couldn't figure out how to monetize from there. So it's been a struggle, but overall it's those tech companies that have caused a lot of turmoil in the industry as well, where now instead of it, going out and having independent, verifiable sources of information, you are kind of spoon fed the same
Hmm.
information to kind of emphasize a point, and
Hmm.
sometimes that point isn't necessarily accurate,
Hmm.
and so people kind of get into these cushions of information, and then it just kind of reemphasizes and reemphasizes, and then when you find out the reality of it, you say, no, that's what fake news is. No, that's not. It's just if it's something you don't agree with, doesn't necessarily mean it's fake it, or inaccurate. So
Yeah. Opinions are cheap and facts are expensive. I love that. And it's so true. Um, so you talked a little bit about this, but how specifically will your experience as a journalist make you qualified for city council in Clearwater? And what will you do differently than those who are you're replacing?
well, yeah. So currently, the seat I'm running for, there isn't anyone that I'd be replacing.
Oh, cool.
The current councilwoman is running for mayor for that seat. So, but I do agree with the idea. That question is what makes me different than anyone else up there running, and I
Mhm.
do feel like my background in journalism, bringing that unbiased, fact-based approach that I brought as a reporter. Uh, is also advantageous to sitting on city council, making decisions and representing the entire city and making sure that they're decisions that represent all of the city and not just certain groups or certain one organization over another. um,
Yeah, and that's the thing. People have different ideas about what supporting the neighborhoods and the city looks like, and people have different motivations. They have financial and social and emotional, and everybody wants, nobody wants a condo in their backyard, but they always want the revenue that the condo brings. It's a lot of back and forth, different people with different motivations. So really
mhm.
the key in that would be collaboration and education.
Yep.
So at the city council meetings, how do you bring that level of understanding to a diverse group of people that all are very passionate about what they want, and they're sometimes very angry about what they want? So how do you get those people to start to see that maybe there's a compromise that might be valuable to everyone as opposed to just them?
Yeah, so I think some of the difference again that I bring and to this point is having worked as a volunteer and achieving things within the city as
Mhm.
chairman of the environmental advisory board, or as president of my neighborhood association, or various other volunteer roles. um, the challenge has been, for instance, with the environmental advisory board, we put forth various legislation to our city council and had it unanimously approved. These are things that I think show the ability to get collaboration, to have a diverse council that isn't going to always unanimously approve something, unanimously approve initiatives we brought forth every single time. I think that's
Yeah.
extremely important. I think the environment is something that is easy to root for, but I know in some cases, other other cities weren't able to achieve similar goals that we were able to achieve because they didn't create uh, create legislation that would be acceptable
Mhm.
for everyone. So that's what I think is important, is being able to listen and then also know how to achieve what it is you want to do. So if you want to do something, or do you want to do nothing? And that's what we found in that regard for creating the single-use plastics, the
Mhm.
ordinance, that it was a voluntary uh, program rather than an outright ban. And I know in Gulfport that same night, Gulfport did not pass their
Hmm.
outright ban, and the city of Clearwater passed our voluntary measure, which led to other initiatives further down the road. So, and that's what I mean by, do you want to do something or do you want to do nothing? So the
Yeah.
idea was that we still wanted to achieve something, and the idea of it was that we could bring attention to this issue, and by accomplishing something, we were able to bring more attention to that issue. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's fun to get a slam dunk, isn't it?
yeah,
When you
yeah.
go in
Well,
there and everybody's like, yeah, we love it. The unanimous
some of these things you would think they would be a slam dunk, but having conversations leading up to the votes, sometimes they aren't necessarily, you don't necessarily get the feedback that it's going to be 100%. So
Yeah, I mean, you think it's a common sense initiative, and for some things it is, like you said, the environment's an easy thing to get on board with. But so everybody has different perspectives, right? Everybody,
sure.
usually if they perceive they're going to be financially damaged by this initiative, they're not going to be about it. And that's usually people's incentive is money. I mean, let's just cut to the chase there. Yeah, I think that the city of Clearwater has done a great job. I mean, like I said, I lived in 10 different cities and I've seen a lot
Mhm.
worse. I mean, these
Yeah.
people that pick up our garbage and that clean our parks and that paint provide paint for our drain covers. I mean, I'm impressed. I've been very impressed living here, so that's why I joined the HOA.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
yeah. So it's going on. So I'm very familiar with with Gainesville. I know you spent your college years there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you were involved with the alligator, and I used to advertise in the alligator and work with their reporters, and very familiar with that publication. It's still going strong as far as I know.
Yeah. It still is. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, just to kind of reminisce a little bit, what were your favorite parts about living in Gainesville, Florida?
Um, I love this question because I don't have one answer. It's having had that experience and living there during that time, I think, was I couldn't trade that for anything. I enjoyed, getting the opportunity to live on my own, away from everyone else, and kind of build myself into myself.
Yeah.
Um, I got when I lived up there, I got a motorcycle from Strites outside of Gainesville there and rode that around everywhere.
So
I
cool.
loved going to school and working at the alligator and getting to kind of cover local elections, city government, counties and city government, national election in 2004 when I was there, and just all of the experience and friendships that I made while I was there. I think getting to again kind of uh, be turn myself into from just a new person to a local within a short amount of time
Yeah.
from the opportunities I had working in the newspaper and meeting the people I did within that time. It was really an incredible experience, and I
Bet.
think that's what it was that I loved about Gainesville, is being able to have all of that, to
I bet.
being a student, working in the school, working for, meeting local people that grew up in Alachua County, and just all those different aspects of
Yeah.
what it takes to, you know, have that community.
Exactly. Yeah, I moved to Gainesville in, I guess it would have been 2013. No, 2014. And then we left in 2020. So I lived there for 6 years, and I was working in Progress Park outside of Gainesville. And
Progress.
for the most part, I was out there, and I didn't really mix very much with the community members because we didn't do a lot of events, and we just buckled down. It was a very busy company. So I didn't get a lot of opportunity to get plugged in. My kids at that point were high school age, so I made a couple friends through them. But I missed the journalism, and I think if I had been in journalism, I would have liked Gainesville more because I could have had that local feel. But I just never really got connected there. Now, granted, my husband had a great reputation there. He was a club DJ back in the 90s, so everybody knew him as DJ Conan. Every time we went out, it was Conan this, and they'd all talk about what a legend he was, and that was fun. But yeah, I mean, and I enjoyed downtown. I loved all the arts and the culture, and the Hippodrome, and we used to go out downtown, walk around all the time, and I felt kind of like an outsider for a long time there, and I really never really got plugged in. So that was unfortunate. But like I said, it's a beautiful city. The people are friendly. They're open to talking to you. They're open to sharing ideas, and that's typical of a college town, I think. But yeah, I know that it's a great experience for students. I've met a lot of students. I've mentored a lot of students that have come out of UF, and it's been a joy to see those guys take off. That's an amazing school, and they do a wonderful job. We
Yeah.
were actually friends with the dean of journalism before he passed away last year. So
Oh, John.
yeah,
Yeah.
we love John. Yeah, he actually helped my kids get into PK Young.
Oh, great.
So they love
Yeah, he
that.
was an institution. Yeah.
Yeah, I love John. So anyways, um, so moving on, I've lived in 10 different cities. So I've
Yeah.
got like friends over here, friends over there, but not really this strong identity. This is your home. The Tampa Bay area is your home. This is your bread and butter. This is where you've worked, lived, played. These are your friends. These are your family. You're entrenched in the local community. That's bizarre to me. So,
Mhm.
so from that perspective, I think it's great. I mean, I think it's beautiful. I think it's very valuable. I think both are good, right? Somebody has different
Mhm.
perspectives from 10 cities, and someone else is like here. So being entrenched in culture and community, how does that make you feel about the legacy you want to leave moving into your political career?
Yeah, you know, I appreciate the question. I thought about it in a kind of in some different ways because growing up here, loved loved it, and we'd go out to the beach, and you meet people from all over, and everybody says like, just you eventually realize that, like we said, we live in a paradise,
Yep.
and so I always have loved traveling and visiting other places, but I always come home and it feels like home when I'm driving back across Courtney Campbell Bridge
Yeah.
and get here. But for me, even before running, I felt like the goal line seems to always change in terms of what your goals are, right? So when I got out of college, I thought for me my end was if I can write for my hometown newspaper and some of the people I grew up with, they see the newspaper and see my byline, how great would that be?
Oh yeah.
I got to achieve that, and that's great. And then you kind of continue to move, that line continues to change. And years ago when I started getting involved as a volunteer in the community, one of the things I wanted to do was get a park recognized in my neighborhood. And I worked with my neighbors, formed a neighborhood association. The city finally did recognize the park and expanded it, and it now pledged $700,000 to enhance and improve this 9 acres of undeveloped space in the middle of the city. And I said, well, even if I don't do anything else, I've been able to get this park done. I've been able to get the city to um, get back on track with their own sustainability and resiliency plan because I was able to bring that back to city council as the environmental advisory board chairman. We were able to advocate for a sustainability coordinator. There's a number of substantial changes that impacted not just my neighborhood with the park, because I feel like that space helps everyone that lives in our city. And so raising 5 guide dog puppies in training for Southeastern guide dogs. There's a number of, I feel, things that I've already done that can't you can't change it. Those are legacy things that someone would say, oh, we have this park here. When I drive by in my neighborhood and I see people that have no idea that, who did that, and they're enjoying it, that brings me joy.
Yeah.
And I think that's important that you're doing things for the right reasons, but also that they have an impact that is more than just for yourself. It's for other people as well. And so
Exactly. Which which
I
park
feel
is it, Jared? Which park
uh,
is it?
it's State Street Park,
I'll have to
and
check it
it's near Sunset Point and Betty Lane. I
out. Okay.
lived in my house for years and drove by it and had no idea it was a park until I did a little bit of research and
Mhm.
found out. And again, this is why it helps to be a journalist, right? Or at
Yeah.
least somebody that has a background in facts and research, because you figure out why is this land that the city owns and considers a park look like a vacant piece of property where people just illegally dump. And so over the course of a few years, and like I said, working with the right people and creating the right kind of foundation to move forward, we were able to, get make some positive efforts there. And the city still has to spend the $700,000 to improve the park, but we've been able to get it to be expanded and recognized. We uh, worked with the city to vacate a street there so that where people would drive to the end of this basically dead end street, illegally dump, and then drive back out, and nobody would notice. We were able to stop a lot of that through, some of these kind of citizen initiatives. So
Well, and
it's
it's a
really
big project.
important.
It's a big
Yeah,
project.
thank you.
You got to be patient. And that's great. And it made me think about my legacy, because my legacy is not going to be attached to a place.
Hmm.
My legacy is going to be ideas and shared
Hmm.
concepts and empathy and all the things that make me go. So it's not going to be tied to a place. It might be tied to several places, because I have
Hmm.
lived in some
Yeah,
pretty cool
certainly.
places. I want to tell the world about it. So thank you
Yeah.
for that. That's a lovely story. Final question. Outside or inside the box, Jared?
Oh, I am outside the box. Yeah. I I think you have to, from what I've learned though, you have to know where the lines of the box are so that you can work within it and outside of it to accomplish what you want to get done. But you'll never get anything done outside of the box if you don't know where the inside is. So
And you have to play inside the box a little bit.
yes, exactly, exactly. But yeah, as if you keep going along that same route, you won't nothing changes. But if you don't know how to how to if you don't know the rules of the game, you're not going to be able to work on changing some of them. So
Exactly, exactly. Well, that is our time. We have done a lot in 45 minutes. I think we've gone a little over because I forgot to set my timer, but um, I don't have to stop until noon. So do you want to ask, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about, or do you want to wrap up?
there was just one other thing that I wanted to share, and I guess I should have mentioned it when it was after a question you had answered about what you like to cover as a journalist. And I think I mentioned kind of a little bit, but for me, I always like covering city and
Mhm.
government or elections. I always like that kind of meat and potatoes kind of reporting, but in the sense of being able to disseminate information to a wider audience and critical information, things that might not be so readily understood but have great impact. And
Mhm.
so I always like trying to I don't want to say water that down, but just make it readable and make it
Exactly.
understandable so that people have an understanding of how these decisions and these decision makers, how those things impact your life. So and there were always great feature stories within those too. So
Yeah, yeah. I think that my desire, when I told Mike Haslas back in the Panama City News Herald days in 2009, 2009 was so long ago. It can't be that long. It was. Um, Yeah, I got a job with Mike Haslas, and he taught me a ton. And he brought me on and as an editorial assistant, and I was doing the obituaries and the horoscopes. And I do a feature, every couple days. I'd pump those out, and I'd work on the weekends and take care of the obituaries, and it was just cool. But yeah, I told him, I said, I'm a mom, I have 3 kids. I want to edify people, and I feel like that's my strong suit. And that launched me, into the Haibu project, which was great. And it was just a big gobbledygook of whatever came across my plate then. So I do think that it's really important to distill these concepts for the public. That's a big job as a reporter. That's part of what we do, what you do. And it's important that you can take those same lessons and the common sense initiatives and the education and asking the hard questions into city government. And I think that Clearwater is going to be blessed to have you. And I might just start coming to city council meetings.
thank you. I appreciate that. And I think you're completely right. It's asking the right questions. And that's where I think that's where I think we haven't had strong leadership is in asking the right
Mhm.
questions, and not across the board, but just in general. And that's one thing that I had brought up in an interview with someone else was, well, what do you think is? I said, I don't have a problem with anyone in particular or any vote. It's just nobody asks the right questions,
Yeah.
and and there's a number of opportunities to do that,
Mhm.
and we need people just to know how to do that. Sometimes that's what it is
Yeah.
people just don't have that training or background.
Oh, I'm excited for you. When is
Thank you.
when is election? How do we vote for you?
The election is March 19th, so you can vote between now and March 19th. So
Okay, fantastic. Are the polls open now?
thank you. Yeah. Early voting ends March 17th, and mail ballots have gone out. So if you have those and you're still trying to decide who to circle in, Jared Leone, first
Okay.
name, seat 3.
So I will
Very
drop
easy.
the link to the polls in your area, that link, so people can find out where to vote, when to vote, who to vote for. But seriously, people, just get out and vote. It's really
That's
it's
extremely,
really
yep.
important that you just make your, be educated on the platforms, be educated on the who's running, and hopefully this has done some of that for some of our viewers. So thank you very much, Jared, for spending some time with me. I look forward to collaborating with you in the future.
Thank you, Shannon. Yeah, you can't complain if you don't vote. Thank you.
Thank you.